Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, Saka here, and welcome back to D&D 5e for absolute beginners, and we're continuing our class looks here with the Fighter. Now, the Fighter is your stereotypical knight in shining armor. They brandish swords or bows. They can be proficient in either. They wear the heaviest of armor. They're the first to run into battle, and they like to slice things down. So if you don't like stealth, if you don't like hiding, and you don't want to deal with magic, then the Fighter is a good class for beginners to take, as you get a lot of combat experience and there's not a whole lot of extra stuff to keep track of. Thinking about a fighter's backstory, they could be a former guardsman, they could be town guard, they could be militia, they could just be someone who found their father's sword and took an affinity to it, or something of that nature. So the Fighter comes from a military background, although you don't have to choose the soldier background, the official background for D&D, but just keep in mind that as a fighter, you've probably gotten some military experience or fighting training done. Perhaps you were part of a fighter's guild, you are a mercenary. You got things done with your blade more than your mouth. Though there is a big decision at the very start. When you roll up your Fighter, you think, what kind of weapons am I going to be using? Am I going to be using strength-based weapons like a sword, or am I going to be a distance fighter who was perhaps an archer in the town guard or the town militia? So if you want to use swords as your primary weapon, you'll place your highest number in strength. If you would like to use bows or other finesse weapons like rapiers or things that take a little bit of finesse to use, then dexterity should be your highest roll. For your next highest number, you also have a choice. If you want to be the tank and run into battle, not worry about magic at all, Constitution should definitely be your second highest roll. As with every other character, this modifier dictates how many hit points you gain per level and how many hit points you start with. So if you are going to be taking the brunt of the damage, more hit points is going to be the way for you. However, there is a class feature. Once you reach 3rd level, you get to pick what type of fighter you are. There is a branch called the Eldritch Knight, which does use some magic. So if you want to use magic in the future, make intelligence your second highest number, but make sure that your constitution is no lower than your 3rd highest number. Ideally, if you can get 2 numbers the same, put one of them in constitution for sure. The last thing that the Player's Handbook recommends for fighters is the soldier background. Just from the sound of it, you can imagine that the soldier background will give you perks and benefits to melee combat. But, I mean, it's up to you, making your character, of course, but if you wanted the ideal streamlined fighter, then take the soldier background. For your hit dice, a fighter gets 1d10 per fighter level of hit point gain, plus your constitution modifier, once again going back to why constitution is so important as a fighter, and your level 1 hit points is 1d10 plus your constitution modifier. So you can have to start 13, 14, or even 15 hit points if you roll 2 18s, put 1 18 in strength, 1 18 in constitution. You can be a pretty stout fighter right from the get-go. As far as armor proficiency, a fighter knows everything. You can be a light fighter on your feet. You can go medium with some, disadvantages to stealth if you're not going to be the sneaky fighter, or if you want to boost your AC and not be hit, the heavy armor is the way to go. You can see the difference here. The light armor provides 11 plus dex, so if you were the bowman and wanted to make ranged combat your primary focus and you have a lot of points in dexterity, then a light armor might not be bad as a fighter because 1, you're at a distance, 2, the AC is added to your dex modifier. Although medium armor, you can gain 3 to 4 more points of armor class, and then your heavy armor gets you 3 to 4 more points of armor class on top of that. So if you just want to stand and take damage and swing a sword, take your heavy armor and be happy. As far as weapon proficiency, you know both simple and martial weapons. So any weapon that you can find that's simple or martial, you can wield just fine. Two-handed warhammers, swords, maces, rapiers, you know it all. You also know all shields, so you can gain AC by carrying a shield. So if you want to be a sword and board type fighter, carry a sword or a hammer in one hand and a shield in the other, you can definitely do that. So as you can see, it's pretty powerful if you wanted to take heavy armor, take a shield, and take a military weapon, or a martial weapon in this case, to really do some damage and be able to withstand a lot of damage as well. As a fighter, you don't come with any tools, because a fighter just has one tool, their weapon. But your saving throws are strength and constitution. So if anything is forcing you to make a strength save, for example, if you fall down a cliff and you need to grab onto a ledge, you can add your proficiency bonus to that modifier as well for that saving throw. And if something is poisonous or something is affecting your stomach or your health and well-being, you can add your proficiency bonus to your constitution modifier as well, which, if you have allocated your points correctly, should be a pretty high saving throw, making sure you can withstand getting hit, grabbing on things, or, withstanding poisons. As a fighter, you can choose 2 of the following skills to be proficient in. We have athletics, we have acrobatics, we have history, animal handling, insight, perception, survival, or intimidation. So this is where you think, what kind of fighter am I going to be? If I'm light on my feet and I'm dexterous, you might be an acrobatic focused fighter. Or if you are a sheer brute who wants to run long distances and, withstand the physical aspect, athletics may be good. You also have history. You could be a knowledgeable fighter about military traditions, things of that nature. You also have perception, so your head is on a swivel. Your military training makes sure that you are not taken by surprise, although you still can be surprised. You also have your survival, so living out there in the camps, in the wild, amongst your other fighters and soldiers. You learn to live off the land. You learn what fungi are good to eat, what water to drink from, that sort of thing. And just the fact that you're probably a big person, intimidation might not be a bad choice if you want to strong-arm someone into giving you information or things like that nature. You definitely don't want to run into an intimidating fighter in a dark alley. Starting equipment for the fighter, you have 4 groups to choose from. The first group is either you can grab your chainmail armor, so there is your heavy armor, or instead of the chainmail armor, you can choose to take the longbow with 20 arrows and leather armor. So your first equipment choice, am I going to be the ranged fighter, or am I going to start building myself a heavy tank? The next choice you make for equipment is, do you want a shield? Essentially is what the decision boils down to. So you can have a shield and any martial weapon. For this example, I chose the warhammer, but any martial category of weapon and a shield, or you can pick to have 2 martial weapons. So if you wanted a hammer and a sword, or whatever you wanted, this is your point to choose, do I want a shield or not? The next choice as a fighter, do you want a crossbow? So if you want a crossbow, you get the small crossbow, or you can choose to have 2 hand axes, which are light and can be thrown. So you, as a base fighter, you do have some range, but if you're focused on tanking, you can use those hand axes for slashing damage, or if you wanted to take just a small contingent of bolts, you can deal some piercing damage. Both do 1d6, so it's just a matter of, do you want a crossbow? You also get to choose between 2 packs, the Dungeoneers pack or the Explorer pack. As a fighter, you declare a fighting style, so you adopt a particular style of fighting as your specialty. choose one of the following. You can't take a fighting style more than once, even if you later get to choose again. So you can't double buff archery, for example. You have to take a second fighting style, but as you can see, if you take archery, you get a +2 bonus to attack rolls you make with ranged weapons. Attack rolls are to see if you hit, so you become a more accurate archer. You can get the defense style, so when you're wearing armor, you get a +1 bonus to your armor. When dueling, wielding a melee in one hand and no other weapons, you get a +2 bonus to damage rolls. So if you do make contact and you do hit, the dueling style gets you a +2 to the damage. Great weapon fighting gives you, when you roll a 1 or 2 on damage for an attack that you make with a melee you are wielding in two hands, you can re-roll and must use the new roll even if it's a 1 or a 2. The weapon must have the two-handed or versatile property for you to gain this benefit. As we see here, the Warhammer is an example of a versatile weapon, which means it can be used with two hands. So if you are not carrying a shield and you know you are going to smash something with a very heavy thing, you might be able to take that and get that bonus. Because rolling an attack, you want to deal some damage, and rolling a 1 on your attack roll is kind of disheartening, or I'm sorry, your damage roll. So you can re-roll it and do more damage with that Warhammer. You can be a good ally and protect them. So if a creature you can see attacks a target other than you that is in the square next to you, you can use your reaction, which is an instant action. You don't have to prep it, it just happens, to impose disadvantage on attack rolls. So if somebody is hitting your buddy and they score a hit, you can use that protection if you are carrying a shield to say, nah, re-roll. And they will get a second roll and take the lower of the two. We also have two-weapon fighting, so if you want to dual wield, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the second attack. So if you are using strength and you're using those double war axes and just going to town, you can use, if you hit with the second attack, you use that plus in your strength modifier on the second attack, which usually doesn't happen, so you get to choose one fighting style. The last thing you get as a level 1 fighter is a second wind. So you have a limited well of stamina you can draw upon to protect yourself. On your turn, you use your bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus fighter level. Once you use this feature, you must rest before you can use it again. So essentially, a fighter does not necessarily have to have a cleric to regain, but that is once per day or once per rest. So you can't just spam hit points out of nowhere, but you know, if you're getting pretty low, you can dig deep and get 1d10 plus your level of hit points back, which may indeed save your life. So that wraps everything up for the fighter. As I said, no spells to really worry about unless further down the road you want to take the Eldritch Knight mastery, but you know, if you just want to be the type of player that wants to engage in combat, or you have a combat focused campaign and everyone's cool with it, you know, you can be the fighter, you can deal a lot of damage, you can take a lot of damage, and you can dodge a lot of attacks. So if you are a new player and you really don't know what class is good for you, but you know you want to hit something hard, then the fighter wouldn't be a bad choice. So next episode, we will be going over another combat-centric focus. We are going to look at the monk. So if hand-to-hand combat is more your thing and, you know, digging deep and releasing energy, think Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, that sort of thing. If you'd rather deal damage with your fists or a bow, staff, then wait for the monk. But if you just want to pick up a sword and start swinging, then choose the fighter. But that will do it for me. Like, share, and subscribe if you are so bold. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode where we will go over the monk. Take care.